The aspen snow was falling harder now, little white daggers cutting against my skin. But I didn't feel the cold. I was too busy staring at the closed back door of the Zenith, the boutique hotel I had spent the last 3 years of my life designing, building, and bleeding for. Through the reinforced glass, I could see the warm, golden glow of the lobby. I could see the crystal chandeliers I had sourced from Italy. I could see the velvet drapes I had hung with my own hands. And I could see my mother, Lydia, laughing as she handed a glass of champagne to Preston. The billionaire investor she was desperate to impress. 5 minutes ago, that same woman had dragged me out of my basement apartment by the arm. She didn't just ask me to leave. She physically threw my clothes, my jeans, my heavy winter coat, my boots out into the snowbank. "We need this space for extra champagne storage," she had hissed, her face contorted in a way the guests never saw. "You don't fit the brand, Mallory. You look like a contractor. Go find a motel." She slammed the door and locked it. Just like that. Evicted on opening night from the building that only existed because of my brain and my labor. I stood there in my thin sweater, shivering violently, watching my breath cloud in the freezing air. The cruelty was absolute. It wasn't just a rejection, it was an erasure. But as I watched them toast to their vision inside, something in me didn't break. It solidified. They thought they were just kicking out an embarrassing daughter. They didn't realize they had just evicted the only person keeping their building legal. Before I tell you what happens when you evict the only person keeping your building legal, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? I'd love to know who is part of this story. I climbed into the cab of my truck and locked the doors, the silence instantly cutting off the muffled bass of the party music. It was freezing inside the vehicle, but it felt luxurious compared to where I had spent the last 3 years. My parents had called it the manager's suite when they convinced me to move on site to oversee the construction. In reality, it was a windowless concrete box tucked behind the industrial boiler room. It smelled of damp cement and hydraulic fluid. That was my home. For over 1,000 days. I lived like a ghost in my own creation. I remembered waking up at 2 in the morning because the HVAC sensors tripped. Crawling through dust-choked ventilation shafts, with a flashlight in my mouth, to fix the wiring so the future guests wouldn't feel a draft. I remembered spending weeks hunched over my drafting table in that fluorescent-lit cell, hand-drawing the intricate crown molding patterns for the lobby, my eyes burning from exhaustion. And I remembered Sasha. She would come down occasionally, usually around noon, holding a glass of green juice or wine depending on the hour. She would glance at the blueprints I had spent 40 hours perfecting, wrinkle her nose, and say, "It feels a bit stiff, Mallory. Make it more ethereal. You know what I mean." She didn't know what she meant. She couldn't read a floor plan to save her life. But she would snap a photo of my work, crop out my hands, and post it to social media with the caption, "Late nights manifesting my vision." She got the adoration. I got the dust. People always ask, "Why did you stay? You are a licensed architect. You could have gone anywhere." That is the question, isn't it? But that is the terrifying efficiency of the narcissist's trap. They don't just use you, they reprogram you. My parents and Sasha had spent 32 years gaslighting me into believing that my talent was merely a utility, like plumbing or electricity. They told me I was the hands. But Sasha was the soul. They convinced me that without their vision and their brand, my designs were just cold lines on paper. They made me believe I needed them to give my work value. I stayed because I was conditioned to believe that love was a transaction. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I sacrificed enough sleep, if I built them a castle so magnificent, so profitable, so undeniably perfect, they would finally have to open the gates and let me in. I thought the rent I paid in sweat and silence was buying me a seat at their table. Sitting in my freezing truck, watching the champagne flow inside the building I built. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I wasn't buying a future. I was never building a home for myself. I was just the servant they kept in the basement to keep the lights on for the golden child. And now that the lights were on, they didn't need the mechanic anymore. I pulled my laptop from the passenger seat. the metal case stinging cold against my fingertips. The screen illuminated the dark cab, casting a blue glow over my trembling hands. I wasn't shaking from the temperature anymore. I was shaking from the rage I had suppressed for a decade, finally boiling over. I opened a file named Project Zenith, Internal. A document my parents didn't know existed because they never bothered to look at the details. They only looked at the finish line. The spreadsheet was a roadmap of my exploitation. Row after row of numbers, dates, and contractor names. It started 18 months ago. The project was over budget, hemorrhaging cash because my father, Dean, insisted on importing Italian marble that cost 3 times the estimate. The general contractor, a good man named Mr. Henderson, had pulled me aside, his face gray with stress. "Mallory," he had said, "I haven't been paid in 3 months. I have to file a lien. I have to stop the work." If he had filed that lien, the bank would have frozen the construction loan. The project would have died. My parents would have lost everything. So, what did I do? I looked at my savings account money I had been scraping together since college. Money meant for a down payment on a house of my own, a studio, a life. And I wire transferred $25,000 to Mr. Henderson. I told myself it was an investment. I told myself I was saving the family legacy. It didn't stop there. When the electrical inspection failed, because my mother bought cheap wiring to save money for a launch party dress, I paid the $6,000 for the upgrade. When the custom windows arrived broken, and the insurance claim was denied because my father forgot to renew the policy, I paid the $12,000 for replacements. I scrolled to the bottom of the sheet. The number stared back at me, bold and red, $85,420. That was the price of my loyalty. That was the cost of my silence. For years, I had convinced myself this was gratitude. I told myself I owed them. After all, they had let me design this place. They had given me a chance when no other firm would hire a 29-year-old with no portfolio. But looking at that number now, sitting in the dark while they drank champagne, I had essentially paid for. The toxic fog of gratitude finally lifted. This wasn't gratitude. It was a debt I had invented to justify their abuse. I didn't owe them for the opportunity to work. They owed me for the privilege of my talent. I hadn't invested in a future. I had paid an $85,000 stupidity tax for believing that if I just gave enough, they would eventually love me back. I slammed the laptop shut. The ledger was closed. And so was my wallet. A buzzing sound broke the silence, vibrating against the plastic console of my truck. My phone. I picked it up, half expecting an apology. Maybe a realization that throwing your daughter into a blizzard was a step too far even for them. But the name on the screen was Lydia. I opened the text. "Don't just sit in the truck. It looks desperate. Go find a motel in town. We need the basement space for the extra catering supplies anyway. And send over the guest Wi-Fi password. We changed the router last week and forgot to write it down. Hurry up. People are asking." I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. There was no, "Are you okay? No, we're sorry." Just a command. Just another task for the invisible employee. She had just evicted me. Left me homeless in the snow, on the biggest night of her career. And she was worried about the Wi-Fi password. Before I could even process the sheer magnitude of her entitlement, another message popped up. This one was from Sasha. "Preston is asking about the lighting specs in the atrium. He says the dimmers are glitching. Can you remote in and fix the levels? Don't be petty. Mal. This is important. Don't be petty." I let out a laugh that sounded jagged and harsh in the empty cab. Petty was stealing my credit. Petty was locking me in a basement. Petty was throwing my clothes in the snow. This was delusion. They truly believed I was an extension of the building, a smart home system they could activate at will. Even after they had thrown the remote control in the trash. They thought I was still desperate. They thought I was still the girl who would do anything for a scrap of approval. They thought I would fix the lights just to be useful. Just to be part of the team. Even from the outside. I looked at the glowing windows of the hotel one last time. I could see Sasha holding court in the atrium, basking in the warm, perfectly calibrated light I had designed to flatter her complexion. She was smiling, confident that her little sister would fix the glitch, just like she always did. But the mechanic wasn't fixing anything tonight. The mechanic was about to pull the plug. I put the truck in gear and drove away from the glowing facade of the Zenith, the tires crunching heavily on the fresh snow. I didn't head toward the highway or a motel. I turned right, heading straight for the Aspen City Hall complex. It was closed for the night, of course, but I wasn't looking for the front desk. I was looking for the emergency contact number posted on the side of the building department's service entrance, the number for the on-call building inspector and the fire marshal. I pulled into the empty lot, the engine idling to keep the heater running. I stared at the phone in my hand. For a moment, the old Mallory, the daughter who just wanted to please, the girl who would light herself on fire to keep her family warm, tried to stop me. "They'll lose everything," she whispered. "It's too cruel." But then I looked at the passenger seat, where my laptop sat, housing the spreadsheet of my stolen $85,000. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, shivering in a coat that wasn't warm enough. Homeless, in the city I had helped build. I dialed the number. Pitkin County Emergency Services. Building Safety Division. "This is Officer Miller." "This is Mallory Vance," I said, my voice terrifyingly steady. "I am the general contractor of record and the qualifying party for the commercial property located at 400 Silver Lode Drive, operating as the Zenith Hotel." "Go ahead, Miss Vance. I am formally reporting a Code 4 violation. Effective immediately," I said. "The required on-site employee housing unit has been illegally converted into commercial storage. The qualified tenant was evicted without notice, placing the property in violation of Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority deed restrictions." A pause. Typing. "You're saying the unit is vacant?" "I'm saying it is no longer a housing unit. It is being used to store alcohol and catering supplies, blocking egress windows. As the qualifying party, I am withdrawing my supervision and requesting an immediate inspection. I cannot certify the building as safe. If you withdraw, the certificate of occupancy is voided instantly. If there are people inside, there are roughly 200. I cut in. And without an on-site employee, the building is legally unsafe. I'm dispatching the fire marshal." I hung up. I wasn't angry or afraid. I felt final. I drove back to the Zenith and watched from the shadows as the fire marshal and code enforcement entered the hotel. Inside, the music stopped. The lights came up. Smiles collapsed. My parents tried to protest. It didn't matter. In Aspen, employee housing is not optional. It is the foundation of a commercial license. When they evicted me to store champagne, they severed their own permit. The certificate of occupancy was revoked. The building was declared unsafe for public assembly. Guests were escorted into the snow. The grand opening ended before dinner was served. As the crowd dispersed, Preston approached my truck. He had noticed the design details. He had tested Sasha's knowledge earlier and found nothing behind the image. "I don't invest in brands," he said. "I invest in competence." He dropped a business card on my seat. He was walking away from my parents' deal and offering me a lead role on a major Denver project. Sasha screamed that I had destroyed everything. "You did that yourself," I told her calmly. "I just turned off the lights." 6 months later, the Zenith is shuttered and foreclosed. My parents call. I don't answer. I now work from the 42nd floor of my own firm in Denver. The name on the door is mine. The skyline project is mine. The signature on the drawings is mine. For years, I thought I was waiting for permission. I wasn't. You don't need an invitation when you built the table.